What's up, everybody? Matt Nuzzo hanging out here in the Real Rental Shop with no other than Brendan Guthrie. Brendan's one of our top coaches here, and so we want to give some feedback on the Armstrong HA Foil. This is going into year 2 for the HA Foil, and for those who don't know, Armstrong is making products that have multi-year spans. So this HA is going to be around for a while. It is an incredible foil. There's a lot of cool things that we've kind of figured out, and I've been using them personally. Brendan's been using them personally, and then also he can give us a perspective on students getting into them when it's going to be the right time. So first and foremost, HA stands for high aspect. One of the things that Armstrong is known for is making products that are very high quality and that are going to last and stand the test of time. That's why they do have these multi-year cycles. They really spend a lot of time to refine it and to make the product that's going to work for you for quite some time. What was the first thing you noticed when you rode this HA?
I noticed just like on the bigger sizes, how easy it was to come up on foil in light air. So we were using it primarily winging when we first got them, just because it was summer, so there weren't any waves. But in lighter winds, it was able to come up at slower speeds, which is what they wanted. They wanted an improved takeoff speed, so not as much power. Yeah, so that low speed lift was really interesting because HA foils, particularly the previous version of HA foils, you had to have a lot of forward speed to get going. It went super fast on the top end, but you had to have a lot of speed. And that's called stall speed. For those who don't know, that's a term used a lot in foiling. Stall speed is basically when you're moving along, how slow can you go before the foil literally just drops out from underneath you. So these have a very low stall speed. In the design spec for this foil, it was designed as a surf foil. They wanted to have a foil that you could pump and that you could surf foil, but that was accessible for people. I remember one of the first ones I rode was a 1080, and it was like, wow, like this is quite a big foil, but it was actually very easy to ride, and the power band, like how it delivered that power, didn't have this big spike and then fall, spike and then fall. It just came up really nice and gradually. When are you putting someone onto an HA foil? So usually I'm putting someone on an HA when they're able to come up pretty easily on foil every time. So regardless of the wind conditions, they're rising up on foil and in control pretty steadily, and then being able to do jibes. So a lot of the times on, say they're on the S1 and then wanting to go to somewhere else, having that stability through the turn is really important. So I noticed that when people were ready for the HAs, they had to be able to like build speed and carry it through a jibe, or if they're surf foiling, be able to glide out into the flat.
And then that person that was like, okay, they're upwind, they're making it through their jibes, what do they notice when they go to the HA?
A lot more stability when they're gliding through turns. So whether they're moving the wing around or they're not using the wing to stay powered, they have more stability while still maintaining pretty good maneuverability.
And then you're putting people into like the 1080 and the 1180, like, you know, that size range. So with that, those are the wider span foils. The wider span, the less it's going to turn, but it's going to have that maximum glide and feel for it.
And it allows them, because it's a high aspect foil, it allows them to go at faster speeds, which a lot of people kind of are uncomfortable with at first. So it kind of introduces them into gaining more speed and carrying that through the turn.
When you're learning to foil, a lot of it is, I just want to be on foil going as slow as possible. And then as you progress and you want to make turns, like if you're going as slow as possible, you're not going to make it through a turn, So you have to be able to start carrying speed and moving on. So that sounds like a natural progression. For surf and for winging, I started kind of with sizes more comparable to mid aspect, like 1080. I was like, okay, that's a drop down for a 1225. Well, hey, this 1080 is comparable to like a 1550 S1. You know, it's actually quite a bit bigger. The size, I got kind of duped by the numbers. What I found is my progression is that with winging, my main foil is the 680. Like I, you know, and I'm moving down to the 580, whereas like I was kind of like 880 was like my go-to winging, and then I'd use the 1080 or 1180 for light air. And then I was like, wow, I think I can go smaller. And then I went 780, and then I was like, well, let me try the 680. And then I kept going down. I'm like, hey, this 680, like I was just in Puerto Rico, I was riding the 680 and pretty light air and able to get it started because of that low stall speed. I was like, wow, this thing still goes, and if I mess up a turn, I can still kind of jibe and carry with it. Coming on to surf foiling, what are you using for surf foiling?
So for surf foiling, I'm about 185 pounds. So I started on the 880 just because I was used to it winging as well, and kind of knew the speed I needed to get on foil from winging. So in a wave, I was on the 880, and now I've jumped down to the 780, and then just like you, the 680, depending on what the wave size is. So instead of taking out when it's like really, really small, like only a foot, and taking the 1080, I can go out still on the 880, and I'm just paddling in, and it allows you to get more pumpability. So you're maintaining speed, and that's kind of the name of the game, surf foiling, if you're trying to connect waves.
Lap waves,
how much more speed you can.
And that's really where they came in. And again, my first foray into this was the 1080. That was the first one that I got. And I was like, prone surfing, I was like, I'm catching waves all the time, pumping back out. But I was still shocked at how well this turns, you know? Like my go-to is really the 880 for surf foiling, and if it is more surf or something, we'll drop down like you said. But if it's kind of small and tiny, I just want to go and get a leg workout, I'll go to the 1080. And it's so fun. But the cool thing with Armstrong is that they are a, you know, surf-related brand, so everything still turns, right? I had a 1080 out in a little bit too much surf, and it didn't just boost you out of the wave when you got picked up. And two, it could actually turn. Yeah, you get overpowered and be bigger, wider turns, but it does go rail to rail and flow pretty well. And the thing that I've found is just dropping down that tail size when, you know, have a much bigger front, dropping down, you know, to even a 140, or now they have the 120, you can drop down a real small tail. And then as I started dropping down the range, I started bringing the tail size up, which is kind of this kind of weird inverse thing where it's like, hey, I'm not quite connecting on the 780, well, I put the 220 tail on it. Back on, and that gave me the stability, but I still had a, you know, still had turning and its stability to continue to pump. So it's kind of this weird thing. Now I'm riding most of the times for surfing, I'm riding the 880 with the 180 tail. And then for winging, I'm riding the 140 tail on the 680. You know, those are kind of, that's my personal setup. But like you said, beginners can come into this and they can use the existing tails they have, or not beginners, like advanced beginners. I wouldn't put a straight beginner on this just because it has turned up tips on it, and you just don't want to be having that out there. You want more of the S1 or something like that. It's kind of a downturn tip.
And it does, the HAs have some forgiveness if you know how to foil. If you're a complete beginner, like you can grow into it, but they're pretty unstable when you're not used to balancing a foil. And that's where the S1 or even a mid aspect is better off for them. But I saw the same thing, just teaching people winging and surf foiling. Like if they changed their front wing size, we went back to the 220 or the Flow 235 tail, just to give more stability and lift. And then as they got more comfortable, you size down the tail first and then jump to the next
front
HA.
size.
And I had a lot of people, whether we started with the 1080 or the 1180, because it's kind of the same aspect ratio, we skipped a size just to kind of fill out their quiver. But I found just having access to the rental shop, each size has a different feel. It's not like you're going to overstack. And I think a lot of people, when we talk to about what their gear quiver is, they're worried about overstepping. And I found it's not necessarily to skip two sizes, because the 780 and the 680 are a huge difference.
They're very different foils.
And I think it's just because the aspect ratio changes so much that's where you notice it.
Exactly. One other thing I did want to talk about, the other two sports, is just wake foiling, which you have a lot of experience teaching, and then kiting. Can you use these kiting? Have you ridden these kiting? Are you teaching anyone on kiting?
Yeah, so kite foiling I've been teaching on if they come off, like say the CFs 1200 or 950.
Yeah, that's really popular, the CF 1200.
It's super popular because of how stable it is. And the 1225 feels a little bit too much compared to those CFs. So I'm not really going back to the S1 for those type of people. I'm usually jumping to an MA 1000 or the 780, 680, just because the size-wise, they're not getting a lot of lift, but it still has the same maneuverability and feel, but you're able to get way more speed. So
speed range, better top speed and better upwind.
And that's kind of what, if someone's going for more speed and really fast turns, putting them on the HAs is going to be a better solution.
Yeah, now they've got the 480, which, like, if you're actually advanced kite foiler, like, that thing cooks. Like 480 and a 120 tail, it still has user friendly, but that thing's small and can go super fast. And then wake foiling, we have a lot of people that want to like ride multiple wakes back. You know, they might have a pump foil on their setup or a lower aspect foil. What are the foils that you're riding behind a boat?
So if I'm going like 2 wake or 3 wakes back and really getting more pumpability, the 1080 is going to be kind of my go-to. If I'm right behind the boat and kind of working on a lot more dramatic turns, I'm either on the 780 or the 880. Just because I'm used to that. Just because
you can go rail to rail in that small power zone,
You still can pump around back to the other wakes, but I found on the smaller sizes, you have to carry more speed. So whether that's the boat speeding up or you're just giving it a little bit more pump or turning
getting up higher in the water column or something.
Exactly, and that's kind of the two size ranges. But for teaching people, usually I'll start them off on like the 880, just middle of the road. And then
once they know how to wake foil, right?
Correct.
880 is kind of a good size unless you want to be multi-wakes back. And then 1080 and 1180 compared to like the pump foils, the APFs, like those a lot of people like because they are very stable and they're very easy to pump, but you're not going to get as much speed out of them, right?
You can't get as much speed and you can't maneuver them rail to rail. And that's what the high aspects foils succeed in is the pump foil is meant to just pump go straight and just kind of cruise on the wake.
Yeah.
So you're going straight and just kind of not really carving around. Yeah. Whereas these you can turn rail to rail like you would on an actual ocean wave versus behind a wave.
And kind of keep up with the boat. Awesome,
exactly.
man. So that's the overview on the HAs. These are really incredible foils. They've proved their worth a lot this year.
They've been used a lot.
They've been used a lot. We put these things through. So if you guys have any questions, just reach out online, realwatersports.com, or you can give us a call at the shop, 252-987-6000, or just come out here to Cape Hatteras and join us on the water. Brendan, myself will be here. You know we're taking sessions every day.
Yeah.
We're using all these toys, so come and join us. We'll see you guys on the water for the next sesh.